Okay guys, behind us right now we have a brand new Mitsubishi Pajero Sport 2022, and we're going to go ahead and install this REDARC BCDC dual battery kit into the car today. So check out our previous video, you'll see that we've already installed the dual battery. We're using the Piranha dual battery tray here. So now it's time to wire up our charger, and that's the next step. So this kit is designed to operate on both the Mitsubishi Triton and the Pajero Sport from 2019 on. So let's go ahead and install this kit into this car, and you can see how to get it into your Pajero or Triton. Okay, so the first step in getting our REDARC charger in place is removing our plastic grill on the top of the radiator here. So all we do here with a screwdriver, and just lightly we're undoing these. So you'll see that screw's coming up in the air now. Once it's up, it allows us to actually pull the clip out like so. So to reinstall them, we would just put them back in and screw our screw back into place, and that would hold them in. So what we want to do now is keep all of these as we take them out. Okay, so now that all of our clips are removed, this panel will just pull away and we can set it aside just to give us access to install our charger. Our next step is to remove 3 existing bolts on the body here. So this is our first one, bolt up the top with a 12mm head, and the next one is 2 nuts just under this bracket here. You'll see 2 nuts there. So they're going to be the mounts for our DC-DC charger. So let's start by undoing those. So we're removing these bolts and just sitting them aside for now. So our next step is just placing our charger into position. So we're going over those 2 nuts that we removed, we're going over the studs there, so that's probably the first thing to locate. In there, you can see the foot of that bracket. So that's sitting over. So using the bolts that we removed earlier, so starting with this top one, we'll put that one in finger tight. And our 2 nuts over the studs on the bottom bracket. So those 3 are existing Mitsubishi bolts. So it's 3 points of contact that side, and we've got another one over here that lines up with a hole in the body, a pre-threaded hole, and that bolt is in the kit. So in your kit, you'll see a pack of bolts and spare fuses. So we're going to grab that bolt out. Spring washer on first, flat washer after, and that will line up with our hole there. So we're just going to put that one on finger tight as well. Now once we've got them all finger tight, we can go and secure them. And now 10mm. And lastly our 2 nuts on the threads down here. Okay, so the next step in the installation is routing our electrical harness in towards the batteries. You might need some light for this, so I'm using one of our head torches, but we do have a good gap in between here. We're going to go, if you can see through here, there's a gap heading in towards the headlight, and if I reach my hand in there, I can actually touch my fingers through there, so we've got plenty of room. So this is our general route, up over this subframe, in under the headlight, turning a corner there and coming in into our engine bay over this area. So I'm going to start from the very end of our harness. So our auxiliary battery one, which will be the longest part of the harness. So weaving that around. You can feel it. Make sure the earth follows it. Once I've got that one through, our next longest one is probably the solar Anderson. If we are mounting solar over here, which we are in this case. thread that one through. And we've got our ignition wire. And then the last part of our harness is our main battery, probably the shortest part of the harness. Thread that through, and I'm going to grab it through here. And now we can go and pull all of that through, all of our excess. Now once we've got that in, we kind of want to just lay our harnesses where they're going to sit. So our main battery will be the first one to duck off. Then we can lay our harness in through there. We've got our ignition wire, we'll just tuck aside for now. And this is going to be our auxiliary and our solar. So we'll sit our auxiliary down towards the auxiliary battery and just lay our harness into position. Or just in the general area at the moment. We still want room to get into the fuse box. Make sure that everything's looking good, not rubbing on anything, and just sit it into position. So now that our harness is sitting in the general position that we're going to route the cables, our next step is to remove the engine bay fuse box cover, like so. Now we can tell straight away on this vehicle, we've got a module here on the negative terminal. That tells us that we're dealing with a smart alternator. So we need to wire into the vehicle's ignition system to get an ignition feed to our REDARC charger. So that's what we're going to do now. We've taken off the fuse box cover and we're going to tap into an ignition fuse here. So we need to get our ignition wire up into the fuse box. So let's run through the steps or the process of achieving that. So you'll notice in part of the harness, we've got this little wire here labeled ignition. So that's the wire that we want to get into the fuse box, and it's not too difficult on this vehicle. It's actually got an existing harness that comes up through the bottom of the fuse box, and it's not in any way sealed or anything. It's just an open cavity through here. So we can just reach in under the fuse box, feed our wire up, and what might be helpful is just like a pair of pointy nose pliers to grab it once we can see it. So hopefully you can see a bit of what I'm doing here, but I'm right behind the positive terminal. I can see the cables coming out the bottom. I can see a gap in there using a torch. So I'm feeding that up, just lining it up with the hole. And maybe just moving those existing wires a little bit just will help ours come up. It's halfway up there now. Once I think I can grab it with some pointy nose pliers, come on a bit more. I think I should nearly be able to grab it there now. So I've got the pointy nose pliers on it now, pulling up, and there we go. So we really only need a little bit into here, and we're going to tap into our fuse now. So in the kit you'll notice an outer circuit fuse holder, which we'll just grab that and show you how to install it. Okay, so now that we've got this cable into the fuse box, we can go and sit our harness into position. We won't make that electrical connection yet, we'll do that at the end. But we can now sit our harness down beside the fuse box. Just get that out of the way, making room for us to put our fuse box lid back on. We can tuck our auxiliary battery harness down behind the positive terminal of the main battery. And just start to lay things out of the way. Thinking about what we can cable tie to later too, existing wiring looms down here, keeping that in mind. And that's our Anderson for solar. We'll tuck that aside for now. And that will depend on where you want your Anderson for solar. There's lots of different options there. So with the auxiliary battery, I'm going to follow the wiring of that relay that we took off to mount the dual battery tray. And that should coming up the back there, straight onto the negative battery, and we can secure there. So we've got our layout sitting the way that we want it. Now we can go and make the connections to the batteries. Now, starting with the auxiliary battery, we'll make our electrical connections, and this may change depending on the battery that you've selected, but in this case we've got a deep cycle which commonly comes with just some 8mm studs already on the battery, and it comes with nuts and bolts as well, so that's what we're going to use today. So the first thing we're going to do is connect the positive on the auxiliary battery. So I'm just going to sit that over there, flat washer, spring washer, and nut, finger tight. And now you'll notice in the kit also you've got a pack of cable ties. So firstly, I'm going to secure this fuse holder to the hold down clamp. Just going to cut those cable ties off. And the first step before we put our negative on is just to do up this positive using a 13mm spanner. And we always work with the positive first when connecting a battery, because we haven't completed the circuit by putting the negative on, so if we did happen to touch the body, it's not going to short out or anything at the moment. So the positive is a good one to start with. Once we've secured that one, we can move on to that negative terminal. Same process. The terminal on, the flat washer, the spring washer, and then our nut. And then we can secure that battery terminal. So now that we've finished our auxiliary battery, we move on to the same process on the main battery. And to be safe, we might want to just disconnect our negative terminal. That way we can work with the positive safely first. So by fully removing our negative, making sure it's not touching the post at all, we can work with the positive terminal. So we're looking to disconnect this 12mm nut here, 12mm socket. Fully remove that. Place our positive onto that position. And we can fully do that up and secure it before moving on to the negative. Using a couple more of the cable ties in the kit, we can secure our fuse holder to our hold down clamp. And you'll notice that one's marked, so that's how we know. The harness is obviously laid in the position of the batteries, but it's also labelled REDARC main, REDARC auxiliary battery there. So now that we've mounted that and secured it, we can reinstall our negative terminal. So we're doing up that 10mm bolt once again. And with a 12mm socket, removing this nut. So loosening that right off and placing our negative terminal onto there. And we can fully do this terminal up. We can't connect our negative here.
it has to be past that sensor, so on what we call the body side of the terminal and not the battery side of the sensor. So for instance, if we did connect our earth there, this sensor wouldn't be able to monitor all the current going to our dual battery system, and it will confuse the electronics in the vehicle. So we need to put our earth somewhere on this cable. So there's a 10mm nut down there on the cable, which I'll just see if I can bring that closer so you can see. Straight down there. So we could go there because it's past this sensor, it's on the earth.
Now you'll notice at this point that our REDARC is actually lit up. So we've got our A profile light flashing now. It's in isolation mode, but we know we've got power to the unit. So now that we've made the electrical connections to the battery, the last electrical connection that we want to do is tapping into this fuse box. So we've got our cable in earlier. Now we're going to show you how to use the outer circuit fuse holder. Okay, so we're looking for an ignition fuse in the fuse box, and in this case we've got one right here. So this is the fuse that we can use. It only goes live when the ignition is on, so the engine's running, and that's when we want our charger to be running the whole time that we're driving. So the process here is to just remove this fuse, make sure our key's off, we don't have the ignition on at the moment, and then we just pull that fuse out, and we can actually discard that fuse, we're not actually using it. So you'll notice in the kit you've got an outer circuit fuse holder. It looks like this, has a 20 amp fuse in there and a little fuse in the back there. So what we want to do is replace that. So that'll keep that existing circuit active from Mitsubishi, but it just allows us to tap into that and give a feed to the REDARC charger. So you'll also notice there's a piece of heat shrink in the kit. This isn't necessary, but just to finish it off nice and neatly, if we thread that over, plug it into our ignition wire, and then slip that heat shrink over. It'll just keep it nice and watertight, hold it together for a secure connection. And then using a little cigarette lighter or a blowtorch, some kind of heat source, we can just shrink that down. Just like that for a nice neat finish. And then we can just lay our harness in through the fuse box, just allowing our lid to go back on, possibly put a cable tie around there that will hold it into position. Cut the cable tie end off, and then we can reinsert our fuse box lid. So it's making sure that our fuse isn't going to foul up the lid or anything. Everything's inside the fuse box. Sit that into position. We've got two lugs on the back, so we're going to locate them first. Once that's in, it's just a single clip at the front. We just want to line that up and just a little push, and that's locked back into position. Okay, so we've fully completed the electrical connections in this setup. So just using the remainder of the cable ties in the kit, we just want to secure our harness, make sure it's sitting into a good position and not going to rub on anything. So firstly, I'm going to work my way backwards in this case, but either, it doesn't really matter. But I've got a harness here from the relay. I'm going to cable tie my auxiliary battery harness to. Cable tie there. The harness continues along here, and we've got some electrical cables down in here that I can put a cable tie around as well. Existing Mitsubishi harness there. We've got some bracketry here that we can cable tie to, so I'm going to put one cable tie around this angle bracket. And then we've also got a hole here, so I might slide that up the angle bracket, use that hole to secure the harness again, so that it can't rub on these metal. If it's secured to them, it's not going to rub on them, like that. And cut off our cable ties. That's the charger fully installed. So the last thing we want to do is check our charger.
Right.
So to check that our charger's working, firstly we want to see that we've got our profile light going. So at the moment we're on A profile with a lead-based battery in the engine bay. If we were using lithium, we'd have the lithium light going. So we just want to make sure that one of these 4 lights is flashing at the moment. That means we're in isolation mode. To check that it charges via the vehicle, we'll go and start up the vehicle now, and we'll see the vehicle light come on. The stage light will either be on solid or flashing depending on how charged our battery is. So let's go and start up the vehicle. Now, a short time after I start the car, you can see now we've got our vehicle light on solid, our A profile light solid, and our stage is solid, which means it's in bulk stage. So we know it's working on the car. The next thing we can do is turn the car off, and after a short time, sometimes it can be even quite a substantial amount of time, but we want to see it go into isolation mode eventually. So we'll turn the car off. How long this takes depends on a few different factors. How charged our battery is, whether we've got any load on it. It's basically just waiting for our main battery to get back down to 12.6 volts. So while we're waiting for that to happen, we might go and check our solar setup. So to check our solar, you'll notice our Anderson has solar input written on it. And it's a pretty miserable day here today, so it's not ideal for checking solar, but we do have a panel out in the sun. So I'm going to connect that into our Anderson plug now. And then looking at the charger again, we'll see the solar light has now come on the charger. So it's telling us that it is charging via solar right now. So that's really all we need to do to check that our solar is actually working. You can see our vehicle light is still on, so it's still not in isolation mode, so we'll just wait to see that happen. Now, one of the features of this charger is that it does have green power priority. So right now, it actually takes as much as it can from solar first, and then makes up the rest from the vehicle while you're driving along. So I've just turned the headlights on now to actually speed up this process. It might make us go into isolation mode a bit quicker. Have some current draw on the circuit. Okay, so you can see our lights have all gone out now. So it's important to see that happen. So we have gone into isolation mode, which means now while we're camping, our auxiliary battery or this charger cannot flatten the main battery. They're totally separated. Whatever we have running off our auxiliary battery is purely flattening that battery. So now that we've installed the unit, we've checked the unit, there's one last step which is optional that we'll run through now. So our last optional step is to cut a hole in our plastic grill. So we've just got this sitting here, and that's going to allow us to have a little peephole to see the lights on the charger if we want to do that. If we have a voltmeter up the back of the car, we may not want to do that. That's probably going to tell us enough information. But if we do want to do that, you'll notice that in the kit is a template to do this. So what we're looking to do is to place it into position. So some of the telltale parts of the template is this bit here. We're looking to line up here. That bit there will be this edge here, and then this cutout will be this cutout here. So we can do it by feel, or you can cut this template out and sit it into place. But okay, so I've just cut that template a little bit to make it easier. We can sit it in position there, move that to the edge. See, that edge lines up, this lines up. That's really all we need to get lined up. And that's the hole that we need to create. So the easiest way to do that is, and obviously definitely we don't want to drill straight through here because our charger is under there and we don't want to damage it. So what I'm looking to do now is just mark the center of those holes. Just enough to put a mark on the plastic. So there we go, we've got our 2 holes that are going to match up with our template. So at this point we want to remove the grill so that we don't damage our REDARC charger in any way. Now that we've marked these, our first step would be to drill 2 12mm holes. So that's going to be the end of our template. So I'm using a stepper drill here, but a 12mm drill bit will also work. I'm just going to clean that up on the back. So we've got a nice clean hole there, and I'm going to make my second one. Clean it up on the back. And now I'm going to use a nibbler tool here to take out the edges from each side of the circles. If you don't have a nibbler tool, some kind of sharp blade, razor blade, maybe a hacksaw blade, some kind of blade will take out those edges. So you can see we've made a nice hole there, nice straight edges, cleaned them up with a razor blade at the end, and that's going to allow us to see our REDARC lights through there. So now we can go and reinstall our plastic grille. And you can see, we can see straight through into the REDARC lights and see what's going on if we need to diagnose any issues. So using the clips that we took out at the start, we can reinsert those, and that's our installation complete. So the process with these, once again, is just making sure the thread is up and out of the housing. That's when we can place them through the hole and line up our feet, make sure all 4 of our feet go through. Like that, and then we can come through and screw them all in. So we're just sitting them in for now.